Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bay State Phantoms and Monsters. I'm John Horrigan. Thank you so much for joining me. This program has been brought to you by the Southborough Council on Aging. Hello to all of our friends at the Southborough Senior Center, and to all of you viewing on SAM, Southborough Access Media. Now, these are my views. They are not the official policy or position of the Southborough Council on Aging or Southborough Access Media. Now, Jacques Vallée, a venture capitalist, a computer scientist, an author, ufologist, an astronomer who currently resides in San Francisco, California. And he says something, and brings us humility as a human being. We have to understand that we may not be able to understand. And moreover, if we are driving piston-driven engines that are fossil-fueled, if we are at the cutting edge of technology and life forms in the universe, it's kind of a pathetic universe. So let's start off with the Bridgewater Triangle. It's an area where allegedly large black dogs have been seen, Bigfoot, man-beast anthropoids, Thunderbirds, those are large birds. Some are prehistoric in nature, giant snakes, phantom pumas or cougars, ghosts, and UFOs. Now, it was named by Loren Coleman in his seminal book of cryptozoology called Mysterious America. I'm proud to say that I read it in 1983, first edition, but it changed the culture of paranormal phenomena and exploration, and I've always likened it to Sergeant Pepper's. So what's the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts, and have you heard of it? Let's get back there 1 second there. First of all, the apex is in Abington, Massachusetts, the north. And then in the southwest, you have Rehoboth on the Rhode Island line. And then the southeastern corner is in Freetown, Massachusetts. Allegedly, this 200 square mile area, strange things happen. Stonehill College, for instance, people have reported hearing a little girl crying and laughing, and they've heard footsteps in a gym built on the former site of a pool where allegedly the daughter of the school's president drowned. The Taunton State Hospital. Visitors have reported feeling their shoulders touched and their legs pulled when entering sections of the hospital, allegedly used in the 1960s and 70s by satanic cults. Again, you need to decide if this is real or not. In 1989, at the Hornbein School in Rehoboth, a visitor reported seeing a spectral teacher and students. Visitors also reported hearing children laughing and talking on land that was used for recess. And then this is a good one, the red-headed hitchhiker, a phantom hitchhiker. Travelers have reported seeing a man with long red hair and a full red beard walking down Route 44. When they stop to pick him up, he disappears. Some travelers reported driving through the specter itself. A sonnet ledge in Freetown State Forest. Visitors have reported seeing ghosts standing on the ledge or jumping off of the ledge and then disappearing. In Copacut Road, Berkeley, travelers have reported a truck driver following them, flashing his lights, honking his horn, and making wild motions with his arms, and then the truck suddenly disappears. I think I have a solution for this. I think that's an Amazon driver late on his route. Within the Bridgewater Triangle, you have Profile Rock, which allegedly is a profile of a Native American sachem. Taunton Hospital, lower left. To the right, a sonnet ledge, and then the Hornbein School on the right-hand side. I have looked inside. I didn't see any specters, but there's been legends of hauntings there for years at the old Hornbein School, a haunted schoolhouse. So this teacher also has been seen looking back and staring back at the person in the window as if that person was disrupting the class as well. And of course, laughter along the school grounds. And they've also seen orbs or balls of light, BOLs. They're always associated with ghost or paranormal activity, it seems. Profile Rock. This is in the Freetown Fall River State Forest. And it's a granite outcropping from Joshua's Mountain. Now, you all know about the old man on the mountain, and unfortunately, several years ago, the face fell off on a rock slide. But it's an image that Wampanoag Indians have held to be the face of the sachem of the Wampanoag Federation, Massasoit, chief of the Pokanoket. And legend has King Philip spending the night before his death here at Profile Rock, maybe even knowing his fate the following day. His head was cut off, by the way, by the colonists and put on a pike. But it's also part of a sonnet ledge. Now, let me go back to that picture there. A sonnet ledge. There you go. And watch your footing if you go up there. It's deep in the Freetown State Forest, littered with graffiti. Unfortunately, people have committed suicide there, leaping from the 40-foot ledge. An abandoned rock quarry has been the site of many paranormal occurrences. People have seen mysterious lights there, ghosts, a lady in white, a lady in gray. We'll talk about a lady in black in just a bit, and UFOs, unidentified flying objects. So who knows? And then there's something known as Pukwudgies. Okay, what is that? Well, they were brought to the public's attention by Christopher Balzano in the year 2006. He's an author. And a Pukwudgie allegedly is a Wampanoag, and this is the tribe that was native to that part of Massachusetts. It's the Wampanoag term for a small, hairy, troll-like creature, allegedly looking like that. Originally, it was a nuisance for the people, but somewhere along the line, it became evil and killed off the Wampanoag creator god and his sons. That's the legend. So allegedly, Pukwudgies began killing the people and setting villages on fire. Now, there's a lot of legend to that because that's what went on in King Philip's War, and we'll mention that in just a second. The bloodiest per capita war in the nation's history that began June 28, 1625, arguably before that, and concluded in 1676. But every culture has something like them. The name just changes. Pukwudgies. Allegedly, they've been seen in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and even in California and Virginia. There is a report of a woman who claims to have wrestled one, and another report of 3 men claiming that they were attacked by several Pukwudgies right there on a sonnet ledge. And I think I have an explanation for what happened to those 3 men. Weed. So, the Bridgewater Triangle, phantom orbs, balls of light. They've been seen allegedly in the 60s and 70s along the Raynham Dog Track, the railroad tracks that run alongside, or the former railroad tracks that run alongside the Raynham Dog Track. These balls of light, also known in other parts of the world as will-o'-the-wisp, jack-o'-lantern, St. Elmo's fire, foxfire, marsh gas, specter lights, spook lights, or ghost lights associated with graveyards. Glowing eyes have been seen, and also UFOs. So Hakamak Swamp is considered to be the beating heart of the Bridgewater Triangle. It's 5,200 acres, and I got a chance to kayak this year through there, through the Town River, the Hakamak River, the Taunton River. So it was amazing with the undisturbed wildlife and the grapes that grow there. So there's the Hakamak Swamp. And so Hakamak in Native American terms, and I've researched this, it's where spirits dwell, place where evil spirits dwell, etc. But it supposedly has been a sacred area to Native Americans, a sacred burial ground. It was a place where they were forbidden to go. And some tribes even called this area the Devil's Swamp. And there were several skirmishes that took place during King Philip's War in the Hawk, the nickname of the swamp. And some gruesome atrocities were committed by both parties. And a curse is said to have been placed on the area by the Ponkapog tribe. But some have claimed to hear a whooping in a Native American tongue that comes from deep within the swamp. And phantom campfires and a ghostly canoe has been seen allegedly on Lake Nippenicket. And that was another lake that I got a chance to kayak this summer. And I referenced King Philip's War. Well, it was a vicious war that raged between the Native American tribes and the Puritan settlers in New England from 1675 to 1676. They were appropriating Native American land, encroaching, moving west, more and more people arriving at the docks in Boston. And then they tried to Christianize them. Anyways, Metacom, King Philip, was the sachem leader of the Wampanoag tribe. He was Massasoit's son. And if Massasoit lived to see what they did to his sons, both of them, he would have been appalled. Massasoit kept peace for 50 years from when the Plymouth settlers came in 1620, when he was about 35 years old. But anyways, it was vicious. The Native Americans would lead deadly raids and fire sieges on colonial villages, including the Lancaster raid, where Mary Rowlandson was kidnapped. And he was eventually hunted down by Captain Benjamin Church of Plymouth Colony. He was beheaded, drawn, and quartered. Barbaric. And then his head allegedly stood on a pike outside the gates of Plymouth for several years. I know that after the Wessagusset massacre in 1623, Peckswote's head and Wittawamet's head were cut off by bloody Miles Standish and put on pikes outside of Plymouth Plantation. I just consider that to be a barbarous act. Now, Anawan Rock, right off of Route 44, you can visit this as well. After King Philip was killed, Anawan took control of the Wampanoag Indian Federation. Another one of, he wasn't Massasoit's son, but he was next in line after Philip was killed. And he was captured at Anawan Rock in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, just off Route 44. And there's been reports of orbs, balls of light, phantom campfires, smoke with no source, and the sound of chanting in an Algonquin tongue. So, again, it's 52 acres of swamp and freshwater ponds, all sorts of thickets. Allegedly, there's quicksand. What I stepped in, I could call suction mud. And there's also sinkholes there. Large poison ivy growth. There are 3 different types of poison ivy that grow in this area: poison oak and poison sumac. In 15-foot cat-o'-nine-tails and thorny thickets in the Hakamak Swamp. And it's the site, as I mentioned, of desecrated Native American grave sites, some thousands of years old. And archaeologists have discovered a 6,000 before Christ Native American burial ground on Grassy Island. This has been at least 8,000 years indigenous people lived in this area. And the story goes that as they were excavating the site, a strange substance, maybe ochre, oozed up from around the skeletons and reacted to the air, causing all the photographs that they had taken to come out black. But giant insects like poisonous spiders, a brown recluse. Anyways, there are dragonflies the size of B-17s there. Angry mosquitoes, as I mentioned, Tripoli, West Nile virus, and the like. Leeches and ticks. Ticks bring Lyme disease. And check for ticks, always. There are large wasps and very aggressive hornets. There are fire ants in the Hakamak Swamp. Now, people have claimed to have seen strange birds, large birds. In Native American folklore, they called them Thunderbirds, but people have claimed to have seen pteranodons and pterodactyls in the modern era. Anyway, something happened in Bridgewater Triangle. It's the spring of 1971, and police officer Thomas Downey was traveling through Easton to his home in Norton when a large bird landed in front of his car, so he stopped short. He estimated the bird to have a wingspan of 10 to 12 feet, and it had glowing eyes. And the bird flapped its wings, rose up, and flew over his car. And I got a chance to visit this area because I lived less than a quarter mile away. And his description was that of a pterodactyl. And he was scorned by fellow officers and nicknamed the Birdman. That's Thomas Downey, 1971. And I've located the exact area of this event. Now, in 1998, in the Bridgewater Triangle, a man reported seeing 2 gigantic birds engaged in a pecking talon battle between 2 raptors above the Hakamak Swamp. And a woman driving in her car with her husband in 1999 claimed that a gigantic bird with characteristics of a pteranodon came out of nowhere and swooped at their vehicle, nearly hitting the windshield and startling the couple. Now, black dogs. Black dogs are portents of evil in English literature, Victorian literature. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Hound of the Baskervilles, for instance. Well, a black dog came to the town of Abington, and these are recorded in newspapers of the time. It's the spring of 1976, and a giant black dog is seen ripping out the throats of 2 fallen ponies owned by an Abington firefighter known as Philip Kane. And then it was encountered by an Abington police officer by the name of Frank Curran, who fired multiple shots at point-blank range, but the dog just ambled down the railroad tracks as if nothing happened, unharmed. And massive search posses were dispatched, spearheaded by police and environmental officials after several residents had reported seeing it. And as mentioned, black dogs, hellhounds are portents of evil and approaching death in British Victorian literature. As I mentioned, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Hound of the Baskervilles, still a masterpiece, a classic. Go back and read that or listen to it on an audiobook. Giant reptiles are in the Bridgewater Triangle. Gigantic snapping turtles, alligator snapping turtles, gigantic snakes, allegedly the size of stovepipes, black racers and water moccasins. Oop alligators, I call those out-of-place alligators. That is, that alligators somehow, a pet owner decided to dispose of them and just chucked it in the swamp. Freshwater eels in some places. Large bullfrogs. And again, in Lake Nipponicket, there's legends of a lake monster there. Now, mammals that you'd see in the Bridgewater Triangle. Rabid bats, fisher cats, they're a nuisance. They make a very loud noise. The black bear, porcupines, skunks, raccoons, coyotes, wolves, who knows? Now, man-beast anthropoids, we call them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. They've been reported by people around the world in virtually every continent except Antarctica. And into the spring, people reported finding big footprints in their gardens, half-eaten tomatoes. Residents were startled. So some police officers from Bridgewater decided to stake out the area one night where it was seen earlier that evening. But all of a sudden, the officer sitting in his cruiser had his bumper rocked up and down, and he saw the red taillights. He had his foot on the brakes of this furry torso. And then he said, whatever this creature was, let it down. And it moved. He put his spotlight on his car, and it moved around the side of a house. And he said it looked like a bipedal bear is what he called it. And then the red-headed hitchhiker of Route 44. So, well, the story of the red-headed hitchhiker is that there's some sort of legend has it that somebody was hit by a car and killed in the 40s or 50s, changing a tire on the side of Route 44. Wears like a flannel shirt, red beard, red hair, the red-headed hitchhiker. And they said what you're supposed to do is to pass by, and I don't recommend this, pass by the Seacock line, which is the Massachusetts state line, at that sign, and flash your headlights 3 times and honk your horn 3 times and leave your back seat empty on the passenger side, and he'll show up. So I decided to do that. So I'm driving down Route 44 about 10 o'clock at night. I flash my headlights 3 times. I honk my horn 3 times, and I'm looking back. There's no red-headed hitchhiker, but the blue lights of a police officer are on behind me, and I got pulled over by the cops. Now, 1638, let's start off with the monsters here. Cape Ann sea monster. This is a report by John Jocelyn, filed in 1638. And he says, they told me of a sea serpent or snake that lay coiled up like a cable upon the rock at Cape Ann. A boat passing by with English on board and 2 Indians, they would have shot the serpent, but the Indians dissuaded them, saying that if he were not killed outright, they would all be in danger of their lives. 1638 off of Cape Ann. The Great Light in the Night, 1639. Originally, this was reported in a book by John Winthrop in the History of New England, 1630 through 1639, at the settlement of Boston. It was a night in March of 1638 or 1639, depending upon which calendar you use. The 1638 is the Julian calendar. 1639 is the New Style or Gregorian calendar. The United States cut over to the Gregorian calendar in September of 1752. In theory, I believe September 2nd through September 12th, 1752 do not exist in the history of the United States. Anyways, James Everell, he's a sober, discreet man, described by Winthrop, and 2 companions boarded a little boat, and they set out for a trip on the Muddy River in Boston. And they'd been moving downstream for about a mile when the three men were suddenly confronted with the appearance of a huge bright light hovering in the sky that flamed up as it hovered and appeared to be about 3 yards square. The light contracted into the figure of a swine and moved swift as an arrow in the direction of Charlton, that's modern day Charlestown, moving back and forth for 2 to 3 hours. Okay, so this we can rule out a meteorite, right? We can rule out fireflies. And when he describes this as contracting into the figure of a swine, in just a second we're going to be talking about phantom airships, but that's only something that he could relate to. I mean, he was a farmer, right? And he only knew farm animals. They were well before the industrial era. They were just learning to harness water power and wind power in Europe with windmills and water mills. So it hovers in the air, moving back and forth for 2 to 3 hours. When the light finally disappeared, the men noticed to their dismay that they had somehow been carried against the tide back to the place where they had started their trip. And Governor Winthrop noted that diverse other credible persons saw the same light after about the same place. Now, what's amazing about this is if I wanted to find out the weather of any date in the history, all the way back to Plymouth, I could probably find it because the men kept diaries and they wrote down the weather conditions. But something like this doesn't show up in any of the pre-revolution chronicles at all. And for Winthrop to write this down, this event did take place. And then the other thing I noticed that when the light here, let me read it again. When the light finally disappeared, the men noticed to their dismay that they had somehow been carried against the tide back to the place where they started their trip. Now that smacks of something known as missing time. And in a close encounter of the fourth kind, where people have claimed to have been abducted by aliens and examined on board their ships, they always report missing time. The Allagash incident of 1976, where 4 men went canoeing into the wilds of Maine, and they lit this huge fire so they could find their way back to the shore. They were night fishing, 4 in a canoe. A light came up from behind them. Next thing they remember, they're paddling back to shore, and their bonfire is embers. They had experienced missing time. They were hypnotically aggressed, as was Betty and Barney Hill, as you know, and they reported being taken on board the spaceship. So this smacks of something known as missing time. Close encounters of the first kind are if you report an unidentified flying object by sight. Close encounters of the second kind are if you see an unidentified flying object or UFO landed, or they leave some sort of landing traces, burnt fields, crop circles, for instance, if you believe in that. Close encounters of the third kind is where they see alien occupants. Close encounters of the fourth kind are where people claim to have been brought on board. And there's a close encounter of the fifth kind that I'm not sold on. So either way, this light was seen shooting out flames and sparks, and 2 UFOs matching the same description were again seen in Boston in 1644. So... And then Lynn, 1641, a most wonderful serpent. And this is a story told here. Some being on ye great beach, gathering of calms and seaweed, which had been cast thereon by ye mighty storm, did spy a most wonderful serpent a short way off from ye shore. He was big round in ye thickest part as a wine pipe, and they do affirm that he was 15 fathoms, that's 90 feet, or more in length, a most wonderful tale. But ye witnesses be credible, and it would be of no account to them to tell an untrue tale. Now, remember in Lynn and Marblehead, Salem, the maritime communities of eastern Massachusetts, they knew it was in the ocean. They knew what whales were. They knew all the fish that was available to them. So for them to describe this type of serpentine anomaly, looking almost like the classic description of the Loch Ness Monster. And then we get to 1692 and the Salem witch trials. And when I talk about the 1692, the following event happens after that. But hysteria, people accusing other people of being witches and with stranger beliefs. And of course, there was the pressing of Giles Corey, where they laid him down on the ground and they put a wood plank over him, and everybody put heavy stones from the villages until he confessed to being a witch, which he was not. In that same year, something known as Spectre Leaguers took place. It's the summer of 1692, and Ebenezer Babson of Cape Ann, with the rest of his family, almost every night heard noises as if some persons were walking or running around their house outside. Coming home late one night, he saw two men come out of his house, and at the sight of him, they ran swiftly from the end of the house into the adjoining cornfields. So going in, he immediately questions his family concerning these strange visitors. Who are these men? And they reply that nobody had been there at all during your absence. So expecting an immediate attack, they assumed they were Native Americans. The whole family went in haste to the nearest garrison, the nearest fort. And they had only just entered the fort when they heard heavy footfall, as if a number of men were trampling on the ground around the fort, the garrison. So they surrounded one entity that Babson shot at point-blank range, and he saw him drop to the ground. A search was made, but the dead body had vanished. They never found it. And the posse of colonists heard loud, unintelligible babbling from the swamp, and after searching in vain, they returned to their garrison. And there they saw more men skulking around the bushes who prudently kept out of range. And in the next few days, two from the garrison saw 11 men come out of an orchard in which they seemed to be performing some strange incantations. And Richard Dolliver raised his gun and fired into the midst of them without any effect on them whatsoever. The invaders showed themselves first in one place and then in another, and seemed to lurk in every bush. And though they were repeatedly shot at, none could be killed. And the specters threw stones and beat upon barns with clubs and otherwise. And then it stopped, and the case was never solved. So there's been tales, one in England and one in Arizona, of phantom stone throwers that homeowners report to the police that somebody's throwing rocks onto the roofs of their houses, but they can never find who's doing it. And they can actually pinpoint the area, the source where the stones were emanating from. Now, in 1704 in Newbury, today modern Newburyport, the wolf scare, and a large bounty was put out for the capture and killing of any wolves because they were killing livestock. And they killed two people, went out, and because they were killing cattle, sheep, and pigs grazing on the island, they killed two wolves on Plum Island. And I just want to reference the Beast of Gévaudan, or Gévaudan. This is a strange case out of France, in the mountains in the south central France area from 1764 through 1767, which is approximately 2,800 square miles. Giant wolves with formidable teeth and giant tails were seen in the woods and in the villages of France. 210 attacks were reported, 113 deaths, 49 injuries, and 98 of the victims killed were partially eaten, most with their throats torn out by this gigantic wolf. So King Louis XV sent out professional hunters, and it really made news across Europe. And Francois Antoine allegedly shot the wolf dead, which he did September 20th, 1765. And then Jean Chastel shot a large wolf 2 years later on June 19th, 1767. And when they did an autopsy, they found remnants of human beings in their stomachs. So these two large, ferocious wolves were killed in France. Now, the White Witch of Littleton, we can circle back to the Salem witch trials, because in 1720, Mrs. Dudley, who was the wife of Littleton's first town clerk and selectman, was being harassed by three local girls. They were sisters who would go into fits whenever she was around. Now, this was the exact same practice used by the Paris girls in Salem, Mass. During the witch trials of 1692, and their behaviors and accusations of bewitchments instigated the Salem witch trials and eventual executions. So, true to form, these three Littleton girls asserted that Mrs. Dudley was bewitching them, and she was causing them to have these apparent fits and predicaments as well. Now, could it be Asperger's they were suffering from? Could it be epilepsy? Who knows? Anyways, they claimed that she could shake the earth. Okay. And no formal accusations were ever lodged, and Mrs. Dudley died shortly thereafter after giving birth to her 13th child. But I think these girls were lying. And my research of old New England earthquakes revealed that 2 earthquakes with epicenters near Littleton occurred in 1720. There were actual earthquakes there. Now, the Gloucester sea serpent. This is very strange. Again, a maritime community. It's after the War of 1812. Seasoned sailors, they know the ocean. They know what's out in the ocean. They know how to sail ships. They've sailed across the Atlantic many, many times. But throughout 1817 and into the year 1819, all people from all walks of life were seeing some sort of serpentine anomaly. It's August 1817, and 2 women claimed they had seen a creature swimming into the harbor. It was seen at the same time by a ship's captain. A few days later, Mrs. Amos Story said she saw what appeared to be a tree trunk washed up on the rocks of 10-Pound Island, which lies in the harbor. But as she watched it through a telescope, it moved, or as a spyglass, I should say, it moved, and when she looked up again, it was gone. And then William Rowe reported seeing a creature, saying that its head was as broad as a horse or more, so, but not quite as long. The same day, Amos Story, whose wife had seen it the previous day, he also saw the creature. And this is what Amos Story said. He continued in sight for an hour and a half, and his head appeared shaped much like that of a sea turtle, and he carried his head from 10 to 12 inches above the surface of the water. He moved very rapidly through the water, I should say a mile or 2 at most, in 3 minutes. I saw no bunches on his back, and on this day I did not see more than 10 or 12 feet of his body. And then on August 12th, shipmaster by the name of Solomon, he said his head formed something like the head of a rattlesnake, but nearly as large as the head of a horse. And when he moved on the surface of the water, his motion was slow, at times playing in circles and sometimes moving straight forward. And then the creature was even shot at 2 days later by a ship's carpenter by the name of Matthew Gaffney from a boat. I had a good gun and took good aim. I aimed at his head and I think must have hit him. He turned towards us immediately after I fired, and I thought he was coming at us, but he sunk down and went directly under our boat, and he made appearance at about 100 yards from where he sunk. And this is a caption. The engraving read, taken from life as appeared in Gloucester Harbor, this woodcut, August 23rd, 1817. Just look at the scale of this creature with all the boats. Find that. In 1865, a giant lion's mane jellyfish was found in Massachusetts Bay. The bell was 7.5 feet, and its tentacles measured 120 feet long and a width of 245 feet. Imagine being stung by that. Haunted Hoosac Tunnel. So this tunnel in western Massachusetts, it was an engineering marvel. Took a long time to build. It's almost 5 miles long through the Berkshires. Excavation and digging began in 1851, and the tunnel was finally opened in 1877. Hoosac allegedly means forbidden by local area Native American tribes. In October 17th, 1867, an explosion killed 13 miners in the shaft. Nearly 200 died while working on this tunnel, and it's said to be haunted. They call that the Bloody Pit. And I've not gone in there, but we also did a segment on the folklorist on this, the haunted Hoosac Tunnel. People have said that they've heard strange voices coming from the tunnel, strange lights they've seen. They've seen apparitions of men marching out of the tunnel and up the hill and so on. So they still talk about the Bloody Pit today when all those men were killed. And locals in the area claim the strange winds, the eerie voices in and around the tunnel. Now, it's the mystery airship of 1909. Let me back up a few years. In the years 1896 through 1897, this is before the Wright brothers, who flew in 1903, beginning in Sacramento and all the way across the United States to Chicago, people were reporting seeing these mystery airships. In fact, one claimed that in Texas, that a judge's windmill was hit in Aurora, Texas, by an alien spacecraft, and they actually recovered the alien body and buried it in a cemetery in Aurora, Texas. But anyways, that's the mystery airship flap of 1896 and 1897. Now we get to 1909, and there were airship flaps in 1908, 1909, 1912, 1913, and 1915. But this one in 1909 directly affected Massachusetts. Airships were being seen in the sky all around the world. But we need to remember David Schwartz, Count von Zeppelin, Dr. Karl Wolfert were all flying dirigible prototypes after the first steam balloon was flown first by Henri Giffard in 1852, and the Montgolfier brothers who flew in Paris. Allegedly, Jefferson saw that in 1789. So Zeppelin's doing experiments in Lake Geneva in 1900. Here's some of the early airships. And now all of a sudden these airships, and again, they're just trying to master flight. Who would want to fly at night? Okay. And the first UFO, by the way, that was ever sighted over Bridgewater was in 1760. It was described as a sphere of fire that was so bright it cast shadows in broad daylight. But on Halloween night in 1908, this is where the story kicks off, two undertakers on their way home at 4 a.m. from West Bridgewater to Bridgewater said that they saw in the sky what looked like a giant lantern, and they watched it hover for nearly 40 minutes. Okay, so it's not astronomical phenomena here. And on December 23rd, that night, 1908, 2 days before Christmas, the Boston Herald reported on its front page the following account, which read in part, Worcester agape at airship lights. This is 1908 now. Wallace E. Tillinghast, this is the subheadline, may have been flying above the city, business at a standstill while people watch. And here's some, look at the etchings there. Here's the alleged craft it looked like. This is from the Herald. Fully 2,000 people stood on Main Street tonight and watched a mysterious light which traveled from 80 to 1,000 feet above the earth for a time, passing up and down over the entire city from east to west, and later describing circles near City Hall. This is Worcester, Mass. The only explanation that could be given tonight was that it was Wallace E. Tillinghast and his airship. Last night, a strange light was seen over Marlborough. And here's the actual article. So there was a series, in other words, this eccentric inventor who lived out in the woods of West Boylston by the name of Wallace Tillinghast, they attributed it to him. Nobody knew what he was manufacturing out in the sheds there. And they said it's his flying ship. The only problem was that Tillinghast was actually over in England at the time. So they still haven't explained it. And there are all sorts of articles here. You can see the Kansas Airship Company being formed. So it could have been somebody flying an airship at night. But remember, when you're talking lighter than air, their speeds are very, very slow. They can't move 30 to 40 miles per hour, and they can't move up and down suddenly and herky-jerky. So, but anyways, there was a mystery airship spate of in also New England and in New Zealand, of all places. And in fact, New Zealand Maori Aborigines actually drew down, recorded and sketched out what they saw. Check that out. This is the airship they saw fly over their village. And again, it does look like a dirigible. It looks like an early blimp, but they actually saw that and they recorded it. And then there were other reports, as I mentioned. This is prior to World War I from the United Kingdom from 1912 through 1915. And of course, the Germans would use Zeppelins as terror weapons. They would actually aerial bombard London and surrounding cities in England during World War I. So there's one seen in Cardiff and Wales, see? So there's all sorts of sightings. And again, this could be hysteria. I like to call this the period. We're in the third age of yellow journalism. So this was the second age of yellow journalism. And then April 10th, 1913, a wolf escapes during rush hour at South Station. A man had purchased it. I believe he brought it in from Ohio, and somehow it got loose from its cage, and they chased it up and down the tracks, and eventually they apprehended it, and nobody was hurt. Now, I want to talk about monsters of war. We're talking about phantoms, right? And people don't know that Cape Cod was attacked by the Germans in World War I. It's July 21st, 1918. Hot day. People just leaving the religious services, heading to the beach in Orleans, Nauset Beach. And to their dismay, offshore, they see a tugboat known as the Perth Amboy, towing 4 barges, get blown up and sink in front of them. Anyways, the Coast Guard was brought out to save those people, but it was done by a U-boat. And throughout World War II, and I'll get to that in just a moment, then comes up Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. in Hawaii. And this odd headline shows up: December 9th, 1941, the Brooklyn Eagle, New York bound enemy planes alarm entire Northeast. Again, let's go back to hysteria. There were false air raids after Pearl Harbor in Seattle, in Detroit, in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. The Los Angeles air raid would take place in February of 1942, where they would fire 1,500 rounds at an object. Anyways, New York-bound enemy planes alarm entire Northeast. So we know the Japanese had no presence in the Atlantic Ocean. They were in the Pacific, and they had just bombed Pearl Harbor, and they were scooting back to Japan. And the Germans didn't have any aircraft carrier or long-range aircraft that could reach the Northeast coast. They didn't have any bases that would allow them to do so. They did work on something known as a long-range bomber called the America bomber, and allegedly this Messerschmitt flew from Germany over New York City, turned around and went back. They had no bombs because they were full of fuel. That story is disputed, but check this out. This is real. I know in Boston that the air raid sirens went off. Extra police were called in, and they passed out guns. People were on edge, but there's no way that this could have been German planes or Japanese planes in the Atlantic, especially what happened in New York City. The whole city was in an uproar. In fact, defenses leap into action. The city schools were evacuated. They were approaching Long Island from New England and then off the Virginia coast. And bombers apparently, they say, were heading for Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and Mitchell Field, and other points. Who knows? And of course, this is the air raid of San Francisco. Now, the air raid of Los Angeles would happen the following February. But this is, again, December 9th, 1941, the Times-Union. Japs try to bomb coast, routed off Golden Gate. So let's go back now. They attacked Hawaii, which was 3,000 miles away. They didn't attack San Francisco. So something happened here for all of the anti-aircraft guns to go off, and they were supposedly routed off the Golden Gate. I can tell you that our air defenses in the West Coast were abysmal. They were non-existent, antiquated airplanes. So for them to chase anything off, but this was in the paper. And I've always been interested in U-boat sightings. There was one in Casco Bay in Maine during World War II. The Germans landed people, 4 saboteurs in New York, actually, too. I was told that they found buried German Kriegsmarine uniforms on a beach in Scituate during World War II. The legend has it that in Hakamak they landed, because U-boats were lurking off the shore of Cape Cod, Massachusetts Bay, Boston, looking for those Liberty ships coming out of the Fall River in Weymouth. But also there was somebody told me that Germans came ashore dressed in winter clothing in the summer to eat at an Italian restaurant in Nantasket Beach because they were told by other sailors from other U-boats how good it was. Who knows? So, but the one that I liked is I heard that at Gurnet Landing, the legend says that U-boat, they rowed ashore in a raft, and they peered into the house of Bug Light on Gurnet Light, and they startled the lightkeeper's daughter, and she screamed, and then they went back in to their U-boat and lurked out in the sea. And you could see burning ships, my father told me, during World War II, burning on the horizon that were torpedoed by U-boats. So I always thought, was that the inspiration, though, for The Russians Are Coming? The Russians Are Coming, still a great movie about the Russians invading New England Island. 1952, Shell Albert Thomas Flaherty. They're 2 Coast Guard men in Salem, Massachusetts. And Flaherty, it's I think of Sunday morning, he's working on his camera, his box camera, and Shell Albert wasn't feeling too good. He's in the sick bay when Flaherty looks out the window and sees these orbs and grabs the camera and calls Albert, "Hey, look at this." And this photo, you can say in today's parlance, it went viral with these 4 glowing discs flying over the Salem power plant. Then in July 25th, 1962, allegedly a sea monster was seen by the boats the Carol Ann and the Vinci. Allegedly it had the head of an alligator, 2 large fins near its tail, and the body of a nail keg. Archie Lewis said it was gulping up the fish in the area and did not concern itself with the fishermen in any way. The Beverly Saucer Dance. So it's April 22nd, 1966. There have been UFO flaps when UFOs are seen in multiple areas during a period of time. They call them UFO flaps. I could call 1897, 1909 a UFO flap, 1912, the ones that we talked about previously. But there was a flap in 1947, namely June and July. Kenneth Arnold was the first one to see them, and he described them as they looked like saucers skipping across water, and then they were recoined flying saucers. But that was known as a flap right up until the Roswell incident, until the Roswell Daily Record printed the press release that they had recovered a fallen disc July 8th, 1947. But there was also a flap in 1952 in Washington, D.C. 3 successive Saturday nights. UFOs allegedly were chased by jet fighters out of Washington. Photographs were taken of these UFOs, or these bright objects above the Capitol building. You can see them online. And then comes 1966, another flap, especially in the Massachusetts area. I remember being called out to my lawn with my father to look at these lights. And I guess it looked like, and I was very young, it looked like the Lost in Space spaceship with these lights turning, and my father said it was a blimp. So it was a blimp. But anyways, this is what happens in Beverly, Massachusetts. Nancy Meduno, she's age 9. She's upstairs watching her black and white television. Her dad's, actually, she's upstairs listening to music. Her dad's downstairs watching black and white television. Her mother's gone to the apartment next door to play cards with her friends. Well, Nancy's looking outside the window, and she sees this glowing light hover outside of her window near the school. And then it moves to the right and left. She's terrified. She runs downstairs, and the father's slapping the side of the TV. All of a sudden, reception has been distorted, has been disturbed. And he's not paying attention to her, cigar out of his mouth. Yeah, whatever you say, Nancy. And then the mother comes in just then with her 3 friends. They were going to order pizza because the Medunos had the phone, the other 2 apartments in. And that's when she said, Nancy told her mother, "Mom, I saw it, please." So they walk out to the front lawn, and there they see this glowing object, green and red lights hovering over their house and moving towards the high school, Beverly High School. They call the police. 2 cops come down, they get out, and think, "What are you saying?" "Sure, ma'am, you're just seeing an airplane." Holy smokes, they look up, they see this thing. And apparently one of Nancy's mother's, Claire's friend, starts following the light. And the other woman, unfortunately, soiled herself. She was so frightened. And the police follow this down, and they have their hats up like, holy smokes, follow this down to Beverly High School, and then it just shoots off up into the sky and goes away. I call that the Beverly Saucer Dance. And then November 1970, I remember as a little boy hearing this, listening to the Bruins game on the radio, bunk beds with my brothers. Mans Hill Beach in Scituate, Mass. This carcass washes up on shore. It's 20 feet long. It's 2 tons. It looks like a dragon, doesn't it? And it stinks to high heaven. Now, the man in the center of the picture is Edward Rose Snow, folklorist, great writer. He was on the scene. I actually had an opportunity to hold a jar held by my that is owned by my friend Dave Downs of actual portions of whatever this creature was. So the news gets out, and people start flocking to Mans Hill Beach. There's traffic jams. Into the next day, the carcass is there. They call marine officials. What are they going to do with it? Some of the restaurants even add like sea serpent stew to their menu, not made out of this, but just to gimmick it. And finally, and this is strange, it's bulldozed over. They bury it in the sand somewhere in Mans Hill Beach. And they said, no, it's not it's a decaying basking shark. So there's a basking shark. So if you look at figures A, B, and C, A shows you that. And then they say, oh, the pectoral fin falls off, the dorsal fin falls off, and that's what you get. So that's what you get with a decaying basket shark. That is that. I don't buy it. Sorry. All right. Dover Demon. We did this also on the Folklorist. 1977. That creature allegedly was seen. It's April 21st into the 22nd, April vacation in the bedroom community of Dover, 1977. Bill Bartlett, he's age 17, and his friends are driving on Farm Street in Dover, Mass. They're drinking, and they're probably partaking in marijuana. And they suddenly see, Bill sees a spindly, tan-colored creature, humanoid, crawling along a stone wall with glowing green eyes. So, an hour later, and this is that was Bill's depiction, it should say red eyes. Bill actually painted that. He's a great artist. And then John Baxter, who painted this, he's 15 years old. He's walking home when he sees a bipedal creature similar to Bartlett's running into a gully and standing next to a tree. Let me back up and set that story up. Baxter's walking home, and he's coming to the termination of a streetlight shadow, and he sees what he thought a kid by the name of Bouchard, who had he was, I guess, kind of awkward looking. Bouchard, is that you? And right as they come underneath the streetlight, they lock eyes. And Baxter says the creature ambles down. He could hear it splash in the little gully, the little stream. And then he follows it and he sees it clinging to a tree. And then at that point, he says, I better get out of here. And that's what he saw. Clinging to a tree on the morning, 12:30 a.m., going home. Feet clinging to rocks. The next night now, Abby Brabham, she's 15, and she's out with her boyfriend, Will Tainter, age 18. They're driving along Springdale Avenue when they see a similar creature crouched down by the side of the road under a little bridge that they're going over. And that was her description, with green eyes. Now, I mentioned about phantom pumas, phantom cougars. There's been a litany of sightings of eastern mountain lions. I just did a film called Lions of the East. Alexander Petikoff produced it. I narrated it about mountain lions seen east of the Mississippi River. Allegedly, the last one was killed in Vermont in 1889, but there's no such thing as cougars east of the Mississippi, according to wildlife officials. That's not true, and they just don't want to panic the public. But one was seen at Pamet or Truro on Cape Cod, Chequesset, all the way down on Cape Cod. And they had three monikers: the Pamet puma, the beast of Truro, the Chequesset cougar. It was seen in 1981 in Truro and Wellfleet in the fall. And then again, it was reported on November 4th, 2007. So after 26 years, it was seen again down there. So cougars could certainly live down there. Of course, they'd feed off of rodents. A cougar was seen in the town of Beverly in 2003 by a resident. Acton, they reported finding footprints and seeing a cougar in 2004. So phantom pumas, now for me, as I mentioned, since 1889, mountain lions are allegedly extinct east of the Mississippi River. But they were spotted in Easton, where I lived at the time, in Mansfield in 1993. So in Northeastern, this is actually, I was there in the late summer of 2001 on Chestnut Street. I call it Thunder Road. I was viewing the planet Mercury at dusk with my telescope, and I glimpsed a long-tailed, first I saw a pack of deer coming out right as the sun went down, and it was probably astronomical twilight. And then I saw this thing come out of the woods, tawny-colored, tan-colored, a large catamount slinking. It was graceful with a long tail. And then it startled the deer. They ran away, and the cat slinked off into the tree line. And also black cougars. Black cats have also been reported. England has a history of phantom pumas. The beast of Bodmin, for instance, of cougars, and wildlife officials don't want to hear about it. Now, the largest measured East Coast jellyfish invasion struck Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Long Island, and also Massachusetts on August 20th, 1978. And I remember because by the 21st of August, they had reached Green Harbor inside Massachusetts Bay and all the way down the Cape Cod Canal and to the outside of the canal in Wareham. Phantom clowns. Oh, in 1981, there was a rash of evil clown sightings in Brookline and several other Massachusetts towns. Clowns in a van with ladders on the side tried to lure children with candy into their vehicle. One clown was reportedly porky pigging. That is, he was driving around with a shirt but no pants on. Pennsylvania and Missouri also reported phantom clown sightings that year. And they've come back. And by May 8th of 1981, reports of clown men in vans harassing children had come in from East Boston, Charlestown, Cambridge, Canton, Randolph, and other cities near Boston, and even 50 miles away in Providence, Rhode Island, of clown men disturbing children who were coming to the attention of psychiatric social workers counseling the city's youth. So, encounters with evil clowns proliferated quickly westward. Pittsburgh children began reporting being pestered by two men dressed as clowns driving around in a van. In mid-May, in Kansas, school kids told of a clown who would chase them home and threaten them to get into his van. And then on the afternoon of May 22nd in Kansas City, Missouri, a knife-wielding clown in a yellow van had been reported at 6 different elementary schools. So phantom clowns are very, very scary. And they're still being reported. There was a spate of sightings about 5 years ago in New York City. I'm not going to show you the report because I don't own the copyrights, but they were seen in England as well. Phantom clowns. The Berkshire Bigfoot, 1981. The reason why I'm putting this one up is because I had a chance to interview the witness at length. He's in the Berkshires. He's hiking early morning, 8 a.m. on October Mountain. And as he comes up, the gentleman tells me, and this gentleman was highly degreed. He had a PhD and 2 master's degrees, intelligent one. And this event fractured him, as he told me. And I tried to talk him down. You know that you're not alone if you saw this. And he wanted an explanation, and it was troubling him. But the story goes like this. So he's on October Mountain early morning, comes up over a ridge, and he hears this tap, tap, tap sound, like tap, tap. And he says, just as he comes over into this field with tall grass, he sees like a furry arm. It looks like a rock beaten down. So he comes around the bend, and he says he saw this ape-like creature banging. It looks like it was grubbing for, banging out, looking for bugs and eating them. And he said he was terrified, but it was so majestic when he saw this, and it had reddish colored hair or brownish red colored hair. And he said because he was upwind, he was downwind from it, that the thing, whatever it was, didn't smell him. And after that, he turned and he ran. And he was terrified. Nightmares, didn't sleep. And he says, he kept telling me, I know what I saw. I know what I saw. How about this? The block nest monster, right? It's a Gloucester where sometimes these strange decayed bodies wash up on shores of these odd creatures. And this happened on June 17th, 1996. The Block Island Gloucester is a nasturtium, a basking shark. It was 14 feet long with a 1-foot snout. And then this blob could have been whale tissue, but then some of the people that examined it insist it wasn't. But November 1996, the Nantucket blob. And there was also in 1999, July 16th, a strange light that moved at incredible speeds, and then it hovered and then shot off into the distance. It was corroborated by 3 different parties on the same night. 2 were coming out of the different restaurants in Nantucket when they saw it off the shore, and 1 couple was on the beach. In 2000, there was a flap of flying triangle. I'm going to call 2000 a flap to go with those other years that I talked about, 66. I guess I could throw to a certain extent 77 in there as a flap year, but this is 2000. Flying triangles, these enormous black flying triangles, and you probably heard about the Phoenix lights, which took place in March of 1997, where tens of thousands of residents saw the slow flying triangle with lights that blocked out the stars. Didn't have a sound to it. Well, people reported seeing that as well in Illinois, police officers, and also in Leominster. There was a shark that came up that we call it the Great White Falmouth Lagoon shark that came actually into fresh water in 2004. And there was an incident in New Jersey where a shark came up in the early 20th century, came up the river near Matawan, New Jersey, and actually ate 2 victims, came into fresh water. So that was unique. And then there was another jellyfish invasion in 2006. I'm not going to show that about the Bridgewater Triangle, but we've heard about shark attacks everywhere now. It's there's a couple of apps my wife showed me about. You could track sharks, but there's signs everywhere in every beach in Cape Cod. But they're seen in swarms, and I guess because they're scavengers and they're an apex predator, that alphas always win out, don't they? There's been a few coyote attacks, but certainly coyotes are running around. They're scavengers again. And then a wolf was seen in Shelburne, a remote town in Massachusetts in 2007. Are wolves making a comeback in Massachusetts? And of course, bears now, especially in Western Mass. I've been hiking the Quabbin Reservoir, and they're not afraid of anybody. And they actually identify, just like Yogi Bear, they do identify coolers as the food supply, food source. Dennis the manatee, he was found in East Dennis Harbor on October 2nd through October 12th, 2008. Problem is, he should have been way down in the Caribbean. And he was seen in the Taunton River and Fall River on September 18th. My name's John Horrigan. Thank you so much for watching Bay State Monsters. Oh, one last thing. Boo! This program is being brought to you by the Southborough Council on Aging. Hello to all of our friends at the Southborough Senior Center, and to all of you viewing on SAM, Southborough Access Media.